Alrighty guys, another week, which means another round of these grand class banners over here on the JP side of things. If you don't know what they're doing, basically they're bringing every single character, whether they're a 3-star character, a 4-star character, 5-star character, story locked, limited on every single banner, doesn't matter. They're bringing all of those characters back on Raid Up because they want you to be able to get whatever your favorite character is for each class to whatever grand slot they're going to be in, because you can only have, say, one grand Saber, so might as well give you the position of getting whatever Saber class server that's going to be on your account. So on the NA side of things, you can use this as a bit of a guide to kind of see how good these characters are going to be at least 2 years in the future with some buffs they might not have on the NA side of things. And if you're on JP, you can see if this is going to be a banner that is worth summoning on to maybe fill in a slot that you don't have available on your JP account. The main thing that a lot of players are going to be using this for, including myself, is getting some of those support type servants that are not available to you. Like I am personally waiting for Kobunski to come back around so I can finally do proper buster looping over here on the JP side of things. Now, something to keep in note is that we don't really have a notable 3-star that's going to be coming back on Raid Up. Not like, say, for Sabers there's Bedevirs, or for the casters there's going to be people like Casterku. It's a really good chance to hit one of those banners that has them on Raid Up so you can finally get them to NP5 and use them at their full ability as a low star legend. For Riders, we have Columbus, as these banners only go up to Reines' release, and Columbus is not one of those absolute humdinger low rarity servants where it's like, oh, now that I've got Columbus to NP5, like the game better watch out because I'm gonna be no. Columbus ain't like that. All right, Columbus, he's all right. He's a guy, he exists. That's about the much that I'm gonna say about that guy. As far as 4-stars are concerned, there is one notable really strong 4-star that is going to be coming back around if you're looking at Riders going up to Reines, but we'll get there when we get there. Starting off with this first banner, I mean, this one is just fine. Drake is a pretty solid AoE Buster Rider if you need somebody to take care of Buster looping for you. Also not too terrible going into challenge quest, I suppose, with her ability to get around enemy defenses with that Pierce Invul. I mean, she's just solid all around. Like, nothing super crazy, but she's also not bad either. Just like a really solid rider overall. Like, if you need someone to take care of your caster enemies, you need somebody to be doing that Buster AoE looping, Drake's gonna have you covered on that one. Medusa being the 3-star is not exactly all that special. She did recently get buffed, but Medusa's on every single banner, so it's not like, oh my goodness, you gotta summon on this banner, otherwise you're never gonna get Medusa to NP5. It's like everybody's got Medusa at NP5. Now, unless they decide to toss a buff over for Marie, not really a notable character. I mean, she can, I guess, survive decently in fights with that triple invincibility. Like, that's kind of a thing, I suppose, but a lot of these characters, unless they decide to go through and give them an additional buff, they're not really gonna be the craziest. And sometimes after a couple of days, they do retroactively go back and they're like, oh, well, now that these banners have been out for 3 days, let's just go ahead and drop a buff on this person, which I guess they could do for Marie, but she would definitely need a lot. Not like the best banner of all time. I mean, because if you're going for Drake, who is obviously the main character to go for on this banner, you don't really have the double great value of being able to get a really strong 3 or 4-star servant alongside that. But, you know, it's a fine opening banner. Then we have Maeve over here. Now, Maeve is a really interesting character because not only is she a pretty good DPS in her own right, pretty much having the anti-mail trait keeps all of the guys on lock. She's going to be kicking dudes in the junk for a bunch of damage, but she also has the benefit of being able to buff Fae and male allies, which the male thing makes sense, but unless you've read at Lost Build 6, she kinda got a little bit of a beneficial buff because I get, it's not even like technically Maeve appears in Lost Belt 6, but if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like, that's not even right to say technically she appears. It's a completely different character, but I'm assuming that's why they decided to kind of give her that buff as well. They're like, I mean, your character model appeared in Lost Belt 6, so you know what, you can buff the Fae allies, which, if only there were any good Fae characters in the game. I mean, can you think of, I don't know, a single good Fae character in the game? Can you think of a single good male character in the game? I mean, I'm just drawing blanks. Can't think of a single character in either one of those categories that are even remotely good. So again, her role isn't to be a buffer, but she does have the benefit that, well, she can pretty much take care of herself. She can also have that extra utility in being able to buff up those allies, right? And the people that she's able to buff up are pretty decent, right? They're very vast categories of characters, and your males, and while Fae is a little bit more restricted, you do have a decent amount of like really strong guys that are Fae attributes. So that is really strong. Just a solid unit for herself overall. Boudica's on every single banner, so it's not like, oh, if I don't summon on this, I'm not going to get Boudica to NP5. Martha's interesting though, because Martha is one of those characters that I'm pretty sure if you were to ask people, they wouldn't say is really all that good. But however, she does on one of her skills have the ability to cleanse the entire party's debuffs, and that on demand is just, it's something that will always crop up, right? It is something that will always have a use every now and then, right? When the Koyanskaya raids came out, like the Tukunska Sanctuary ones, Martha came out for some of those setups because there was those like third raids, like after the Surtur ones, where I think you started off like getting debuffed by one of like, it's like that one where you have the numerous rounds of enemies, like it's like, oh, you'd fight like the dudes and you'd fight like the tanks and all the, you know, just whatever BS Koyanskaya was throwing us at that point. But there was one of the raids that started you off with a debuff, and Martha was really good for those because you could just instantaneously get rid of all of those debuffs and go through the raid as per usual. That is why she will always kind of have a use. She's also just a 4-star, really easy to level up. It doesn't really take a whole bunch of team cost, so you can just slap her in there and have her remove all of your debuffs, hit the enemy with a little bit of a defense down, so you get a little bit of extra defense, I suppose. But it's kind of like just a nice character to have in your box. So I do think that helps her out a little bit on this banner. Maeve, obviously being a pretty strong servant in her own right, is also really helping this banner. Not the worst. Obviously, there are stronger banners to go on, but I gotta give props where there are props for some of these characters, especially because there's probably gonna be one person who's gonna be like, I can't wait to get my Rider Martha to Grail 100, and I'm gonna max her out and, you know, make her my Grand Rider. So just for that guy, I want to give them their props for at least whatever it's worth. Now, this is an interesting one because Ushi's on every single banner. Obviously, she's a solid low-star unit, you know, that's fine, but she's on every single banner, not really, you know, incentive enough to summon on this banner. These guys are, I guess, fine, right? Like, they continue to kind of like dole them little buffs here and there. You can do crits with them, but who really cares? The main headliner for this one is Iskandar, and the main thing they did with this guy over here is they gave him a battery. So Iskandar went from effectively being one of the worst characters in the game because it's like, what does he even do? He doesn't really do anything because, you know, it's like, oh, well, I could hit really hard. I could do a bunch of damage and I'm buffing the party. But it's like, sorry, buddy, unless you've got the battery, if you don't have a way to do the buster looping, you're not a good servant, right? That's just what Koyanskaya has done for buster servants. If you ain't looping, you ain't good, all right? So then Lysenko came along and they tossed the guy a buff. They were like, here you go. We're going to go ahead and give you that 30% battery on your first skill. Bada boom, bada bing, get in there. So now Iskandar, overnight, when he got that, went from being a 0 to a hero. Because now he's a character that can do the buster looping. He can double buff the party's attack because you can loop your skills back, remember, with Koyanskaya and how that works. She's giving everybody the attack, the ignore defense. People are getting NP damage for 3 turns, so that stacks. That's really good with Oberon. He's giving everybody the crit damage. That can be stacked. The only real weakness for this guy is that he doesn't have a power mod, and I guess you can't stack his 3rd skill buster buff. That's really the only weakness for him, but this guy is not only doing a bunch of damage, but lets everybody else do a bunch of damage. Because again, you're stacking the attack buff and the NP damage buff, which also means he plays very nice with Oberon. So unfortunately, even though I do think Drake is a really solid character, you would just go for Iskandar. But now it actually feels really good to summon for one of the most goated characters of all time in all of the Fate franchise, because he's actually good now, right? It does feel like they actually have done him justice, and that if you want to make Iskandar your Grand Rider, you can actually feel good about doing that now. Definitely a immensely powerful character to get in your box. One that I would probably be considering if I had my own Koyenskaya, but I don't have my own Koyenskaya, so he would be a really cool character to have, but somebody that I really couldn't use very effectively. Ozymandias is as good as ever. I mean, Ozymandias is just... this dude is a mistake. He's a little too good, I would venture to say. I mean... bro functionally has like a 44% attack and defensive buff, so his damage is all going to be really good. He can guarantee not only his own buffs, but all of the other characters' buff in the party, giving them battery, giving them attack. He's got the skill cooldown reduction. He's even changing the battlefield type to sunlight if that is something you care about. I mean, we're genning stars, we're critting, we're NP sealing, we're just doing all the things with Ozymandias. Just a very, very effective single target rider. Unfortunately, I think they realized how good Ozymandias is, so they chucked Astolfo on this banner, and Alexander, which Alexander, what does he even do? I mean, this is really more of a commentary on the sad state of Quick when people are like, Alexander's a really good sub-quick buffer. It's like, is he? Is he a really good sub-quick buffer? He gives like a small quick buff and a little bit of charisma, and we're coping that hard for low rarity quick buffers. Then this is the guy that we got to use. Okay, fine. You know, sure. If you don't have him NP5, then I guess going on this banner, it's your lucky day. You'll get those Alexander coins. Astolfo, I guess, can be useful early on in your accounts, because he does have that 50% battery, and he does get the triple dodge whenever he does fire his NP. But aside from that, as soon as you start developing your box in any conceivable way, it's just a guy that's going to get phased out of usage, unless you really like using the femboy in your team setups, right? You just really like the Memory of Trifus costume. But outside of that, it's just a character you're not really going to use, and you're definitely going on this one for Ozymandias. But if you want a single target rider, unfortunately, I do think he's kind of beating Medb out in some aspects, just for the fact that, like, dude, being able to do all the stuff that she effectively does, but for free, just for everybody, for no reason, is very strong. Medb does have a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because she does have the anti-male power mod, which Ozymandias doesn't have. Everybody is equal rights, dude. Everybody's getting a pyramid dropped on him. You know, he's dropping a pyramid on everybody. So I guess, you know, he's got that going for him. But very, very solid, very, very strong. Riders just in general are very, very strong servants and are in a very good position. Although I say that, and then we have the 4-star and the 3-star that I was talking about at the beginning of the video. So Rider Mordred is a really good character to get numerous copies of, because Rider Mordred has this issue where at NP 1 and 2, she will loop 100% of her NP back, but the enemies will still be alive because she does not hit very hard. She is a wet paper towel being thrown onto somebody, effectively meaning she does no damage. So she's a really good looper. Like, she will loop like nobody's business. You just got to get her those extra copies for that additional damage to help her out in making sure that she's going to be able to take out the enemies that she's fighting. Columbus, if you care about getting all of these 3-stars to NP5, this is a good banner to try to get him to said NP5. Quetzalcoatl, I don't know what they're doing with this character, because I think we can all agree Quetz is absolutely sick, nasty, goated with the sauce in Babylonia, and then for some reason they have just not chucked another buff to her for some reason. Like, Medb keeps getting all the buffs in the world, Ozymandias keeps getting all the buffs in the world, and where are my buffs for Quetzalcoatl? I mean, she's not like terrible. It's not like she's in a bad position. Thankfully, her kit was good enough when she dropped that they don't have to do a whole lot for her. I mean, she has survivability in the guts. She already has a battery. She already can do some pretty good crits. They buffed her charisma to also bomb some stars. She can seal NPs on her own NPs, but bro, where are the buffs? Where are the buffs, dude? Because I will still kind of cope and bring Quetzalcoatl to boss fights and stuff, and even nowadays, and I'll be like, man, I just wish she had some modern buffs or something, dude. I wish they would just chuck her something so she could have a little bit of an easier time going through these stages. So it is definitely not as good as characters like Ozymandias or Medb after their like 300 rounds of buffs. You would expect the characters that are getting like 50 different buffs to be a bit better than a character that gets no love at all whatsoever. But hey, she's still good enough to use. Like if you're somebody that wants to be like me and cope with Quetzalcoatl, still more than enough to get results done, but it definitely does not feel as good as using somebody like Medb or Ozymandias as they get more and more modern buffs to make them better characters. So it's good enough if you're going to be going in on the banner over here to try to get your Columbus copies or especially Rider Mordred copies. Quetzalcoatl is not a bad consolation prize in that, but it does kind of feel bad because there are better single target Buster Servants on right up alongside her. Maid Alter, bit weird. I'm waiting for her to get the Skahawk buff where they just let her kind of supercharge her own NP, because right now it's a good character to use if you have Scotty and or Ruler Scotty alongside her, because you just need to dump fat batteries into her. If you could do that, then, you know, you can just let her rip and tear through people and she's doing big mondo damage. But if you do not have the proper supports for her, often you're going to be sitting around doing nothing. You're going to be holding your meat in your hands, just waiting for her to get back to her NP, which can be a little bit frustrating, right? She's built kind of like those older quick servants, which makes sense. She's a year 2 servant, so no wonder she would have a harder time getting back to her NP. They didn't give her the big fat battery and all that other stuff, hoping that they will throw her a buff. You know, just say screw it. You know, you gave Enkidu a 50% battery, give her a 50% battery. She could actually really use it. It would make her a whole lot better, right? She's already hitting pretty decently hard, and the niche of her being able to loop her quick card back very effectively to be able to do some really big damaging turns is really nice. So this is one of those characters that is pretty solid if you've got the supports for her, but if you do not have the supports for her, you're probably not going to use her very much, unfortunately. It doesn't also help that while I was a huge advocate for Summer Camilla when she came out, because finally I felt justified, where I was like, see, I told you guys, Camilla is a hot character. They didn't believe me. They didn't see like the year 1 Summer CEs that we got for her, where she was looking like an absolute baddie, but we got Summer Camilla and everyone's like, oh, all of a sudden we understand what this guy is talking about. He's cooking with this one. But you got to trust me when I'm telling you, some of these characters, they're just hiding it. They're hiding it under their freaky outfits, but Camilla is one of them. Unfortunately, doesn't really translate to the craziest unit of all time. I mean, she doesn't really hit very hard. She's got some really good utility effects, I would say, if you want to bring her into boss fights, but if you're looking for like a farmer or a general DPS character, you might want to look the other way. Not really gonna be the character for you if you're looking for that. But if you're trying to beef up your quick characters over here, then I guess technically you can get an AoE and a single target. That's kind of something, and I guess Red Hair is also here as well. All right, they don't want to believe me, but this boy, this guy Ivan, this guy's crazy. This guy's nuts. They will keep throwing Ivan buffs and trying to get people to summon for him, and people will just be like, nah, we don't want the freaky, you know, Dark Souls boss over here. But I'm telling you, this dude Ivan is crazy. This guy is nuts. He has no rights having all of the buffs that he has. My brother in Christ, he has 50% NP gain for 3 turns for free. He's hitting lawful and chaotic power mod enemies. They gave him a 30% not power mod, but 30% battery so he can do the farming. He can debuff cleanse. He can remove all of the enemy's buffs. He gives himself invincibility. He can neuter the enemy's attack. He can do the star regenning so he can do the crits. He gives himself a big 40% buster buff for 3 turns, meaning you can loop that back with Koyanskaya for 80%. He functionally almost has a free mana burst. And then he's also giving himself NP damage on the NP, and then lowering the enemy's buster resistance by 30% for 3 turns. So if you're going into a node like a boss fight or something along those lines, bro's just going to be getting stronger every single turn. They will just keep chucking Ivan buffs in hopes that people will eventually summon for him. He is a monstrous servant. He is ridiculously powerful, right? So if you want to summon for him, if you're like, man, I need me a guy that is just going to step on everybody for me, Ivan's your man. Unfortunately, not the best side piece units over here. I mean, I do think that Murasaki over here is fine. She has what? Is it the Earth Power mod? Is the power mod that they decided to give her? Something along those lines. Solid enough single target arts writer. Like, you can get some decent results out of her with that. Manager Carter, they did toss a buff. Was that during the anniversary they tossed them the buff? I'm kind of blanking on that one for when they actually decided to throw a buff over his way, but they're not bad. Obviously, yeah, okay, I'm just checking it right now. It is Earth Power mod that they decided to give her. So yeah, like, she could actually do some pretty good damage. I think that was very, very helpful for them to give her because it synergizes really well. with her kit and just giving her the one thing she was missing, and that is damage. Albeit it is against like specific enemies, but it's not bad, right? I would say more bang for your buck. This is a really strong banner, although I understand the appeal of going on, say, a lower powered banner like Iskandar's, because you like Iskandar more, and that is the whole point of these banners, is getting a character you like to that Grand Servant status. So I could totally understand that one, but this is definitely a Mondo strong banner over here. This one is fine. Nothing too crazy. Achilles, can't really say that he's like the worst servant of all time, but he's also not that bad. I mean, he can do the looping for you. That's fine. He's got, you know, the NP gain, the battery, the quick buffs. He's got the stuff he needs to get across the finish line. His damage is fine, right? He's nothing too crazy. He's got survivability technically with the invincibility, and he has the taunt, which is a good team utility. Not a bad character at all whatsoever. Like, Achilles is fine. Nothing bad to really say about him. He's just solid. Caenis over there, though, I don't know what they were cooking with that one. Kind of really feels bad because Caenis is such a prevalent character in the story for part 2, and not only is her OG version not super great, but the Rider version over here just feels like it's missing something. A lot of the characters from that summer event actually feel like they were missing something. Like Caenis and Sei both feel like they're missing like 1 or 2 effects in their kits. Like they were almost holding back, so they were like, yeah, but in like 2 or 3 years we're going to be really cooking whenever we come out with skill buffs for these guys that we had planned to give them when they initially came out. But hey, if you really like Summer Caenis, you know, you're going to summon on this banner anyway. You know, you're like, you know what, let me get my tomboy GF over here while also getting myself a pretty good consolation prize in Achilles. Reines is pretty nuts. This might be one of the better banners by far, just because this is effectively waiver 2. I actually was making the argument on stream that I think I like Reines a bit more than waiver, which is hard for a lot of people to hear, because if you've been playing the game since year 1, you have those nostalgia goggles on and you're like, nah, waiver, that guy's the strongest, he's never gonna get undone. But let me tell you something, dude, like Reines being able to remove your class disadvantage, where you're just like, I can just use my characters for free, I can bring these supremely OP characters, like, you know, let's say for instance, like MHX Alter is a really good example. Character that can hit really hard, it can do a mondo amount of damage, but also a light gust of wind takes them out. Oh, would you look at that, not only can they not take damage because of all of the defensive effects that Reines is going to be giving them, she's still beefing up their stats, she's still giving them the big attack buff, lowering the enemy's defense, but then she's also just saying they're not berserkers anymore. These guys, no, the berserker you're looking for, not here, they don't exist, my bad. Go look around, you know, your berserkers at a different castle, go look for them over there. They don't exist over here. You're not going to be smacking up my buddies over here, and then everybody is unkillable for like the next couple of turns. Reines is just supremely good. She is just a very powerful servant. I mean, even giving stuff like the NP gain on the NP is like really strong, and I believe it, even though it is just for herself, like the debuff cleanse on herself is really strong in being able to ensure that your support is always going to be doing their supporting, right? They're not going to be getting slowed down by enemy debuffs and stuff along those lines. Reines, I think, is supremely powerful. I would say she is probably more relegated to more difficult content. Her and Waver are kind of in that position where Reines does give the attack buff and Waver himself does give an attack buff, but a lot of the other things they're doing aren't really going to be used in your 90 plus or plus style quest, because defense doesn't really matter, you shouldn't really be getting hit, and unless you have lower NP characters, the crit buffs are not really going to be making all that much of a difference. Their NPs can be really good if you get them, in putting them in front of your offensive NPs for lowering the enemy's defense, but usually you're going to be like plug suiting them out for other people if you are relying on them. So, you know, maybe not the craziest for those, but when you have them and when like you're missing them, they're really good characters to have, especially Reines in her case being more built with a modern sensibility with how her kit is outfitted. So yeah, that is kind of my take on a lot of these banners that are going on right now. You have some very strong options for single targets with people like Medb, Ozymandias. You have really strong AoE options with people like Ivan and Iskandar, and then you have a really strong support coming back around in Reines. And Reines also does fulfill that niche of kind of being the rare rider slot on the friends list, where you can actually have a really strong supporting unit. I didn't really talk too much about Dobrania over here. She got a buff that technically allows her to do looping. It's not the prettiest, kind of makes me sad because I really like Dobrania over here. She is doubling not only as cute anime girl.jpg, but she's also the blue eyes white dragon. She's a Yu-Gi-Oh reference, which is like really sick. And I'm not gonna say that she's bad. She's definitely not a bad servant. I'm not trying to give off that impression, but it's just a little bit disappointing that technically you can get some usage out of her. I mean, but it's just awkward. It's just like unfortunate. I would have liked them to go a little harder on the character, especially because she came out next to Tai Gong. Tai Gong is such an insane servant. We'll talk about him when his banner comes back around. I'll just be sure to splooge all over the place for how insanely good that guy is, but feels like they held back a little bit on that one. But let me know which banner you're going to be summoning on. The next round of rider banners that we're going to be getting next week should be bringing people like Tai Gong, Constantine, Takeda Shingen, you know, Bakken, Andromeda. Unironically, probably not as strong as this first round of banners. There are some really supremely powerful riders that are coming out on that second round, but it's a little bit weird to see no Tai Gong with Dobrania, right? It is really weird to kind of split them up because you came out with Tai Gong, but as you can see, nope, no more rider banners. That's it. We're done. That's all of them. That's all of them for this initial round. So I don't know what they were cooking with that one. I don't know who they're going to be chucking on Tai Gong's banner, but you know what? We'll just have to see next week. So leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, found it informative, or maybe even entertaining. I know, crazy that videos can be entertaining, but yeah, with all that being said, I'm gonna go and get out of here, all that good stuff, and bye.